Everyone, welcome to the March 9th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Fritz.
Here.
Fish. Saltzman. Novick.
Here.
Mills.
Here. Welcome, everyone. Had to have you here this morning. We have regular council business and a special thank you to someone who has served Portland very well. That will come in a little while. We have some items on the consent calendar that have been removed to the regular calendar. No, I guess we don't. Sorry. We have some items on the regular calendar that are being rescheduled. But anyone have anything that they want to request to move from the consent calendar to the regular calendar? Okay, then that will stand as it is. We have some time certain items this morning. We'll get to them hopefully pretty close to their times scheduled. If you're here to testify on a council calendar item, you just need to let our council clerk know and she'll make sure that you're called. We typically allow 3 minutes for testimony, and it looks like we won't have so many people here this morning that we can't accommodate that. If you're here to speak on a council calendar item, you need only give your name, not your address. And we ask that we always follow the rules of courtesy in this chamber for everyone involved. With that, let's take item 213, please.
Request of Lightning Watchdog PDX to address council regarding points pertaining to freedom of speech.
Come on up. Morning.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Watchdog PDX. One of the things I found interesting on the ruling pertaining to Joseph Walsh and Mayor Charlie Hales, basically pertaining to the Portland City Code 3.15.020B.56, which allows for a complete and indefinite ban of individuals from council meetings. That actually was considered unconstitutional, and that's what the ruling was really about. My position, again, is on freedom of speech, being able to speak in front of the commissioners, in front of the mayor, and not having my speech restricted. Now, when I basically filled out my form for the communication request, I wrote down Lightning Watchdog PDX points to Federal Judge Simon pertaining to freedom of speech. Before it was put on the agenda, that was edited by the auditors, and they took out the name Federal Judge Simon. As you know, Federal Judge Simon was the one that made the ruling on Joseph Walsh's decision. Now, by their policy, they say that third-party names will not be published. Again, I was actually complimenting the federal judge pertaining to this ruling, pointing to freedom of speech. Again, they edited what I wanted to put on the agenda. Again, that's in violation of the First Amendment. Again, also the Constitution. You have no right to limit what I put down and what I say, unless you look at that as being unsafe in any manner, which it is not. Again, your policy states that you're going to do that. I disagree again with your policy. I challenge your policy. Again, my position is that courts have concluded that a city council meeting is a limited public forum for the purposes of First Amendment analysis. Again, you're editing what I want to have in written form on the agenda. So again, your policies are in violation. Now, you may sit there and say, well, we don't have to allow you to communicate to us by voice. That's not in the Constitution. Now, I would have to challenge you on that, because if you do not allow us to speak to you, and you think you have a right to do that, our only recourse would be to recall the mayor and have you removed out of office. Because freedom of speech is to bring our grievances forward and to be heard. And that creates the greatest change throughout this city. And if you try to censor us, we're going to challenge you in court Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's take 214.
Request of Craig Rogers to address council regarding government transparency.
Good morning.
Morning. Craig Rogers, 11010 Southeast Yamhill Street, Portland, Oregon. I'd like to address transparent and accountable. I want to tell you that one of my favorite movies is The Wizard of Oz. One of the most telling parts of that movie is when Toto pulls the curtain back and you see the gentleman behind the curtain with all the buttons, whistles, and bells, and they say, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. Actually, at the start of the street feast, somebody got up, walked out, and never came back. That gentleman might as well have had a curtain attached to him because it really made me wonder what's going on behind closed doors and underneath the table. So I started looking more, and I thought I got a lot to learn. And when I started looking at some of the things recently that had occurred, let alone what I know in the past, for instance, the airport deal, the path to nowhere, and the way the real estate deals were done, and how it's not just a percentage, but actually 100% in some of the things that times over the value of them, and where the city lost the value in these real estate deals. And they're very complicated. They're kind of like a shell game. And I had somebody in the car with me over the weekend, and we sat there and talked about this. This gentleman has actually been a trustee for a $35 billion pension plan. We sat for 2 decades negotiating contracts between Teamsters and Coca-Cola. This gentleman really knows a lot. He spent 10 years in Ron Wyden's office. We couldn't make heads or tails of why anybody would do this airport plan with the post office. At its most basic, it's like you're walking into a car dealer and they want 20 grand for a car and you say, here, I'll give you 40. So when I look at the front of the Tribune, and here's a woman and children's shelter, and they don't have the money to expand and to protect these people, it really makes me wonder how the city can do these deals where they're giving away millions and they can't come up with the money to protect the homeless, women and children. I'm a product of a broken family. We used to have to open up the oven and turn on the heat because the oil tank was empty. Sell my Lionel train set to pay the electric bill. I know what it's like. I lived it. And we need to make the public, the citizens, more of a priority and have money for these people, the needy, the public, rather than the small, let's say, developers. We need to make more of the public and reach out to them. So I want to go over something here. Transparent.
Craig, you're running out of time, so sum up, please.
Transparent, Webster's, easy to notice or understand, honest and open, not secretive. Accountable, required to explain actions or decisions to someone, required to be responsible for something.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, we'll take 215. Please, sir.
Request of Reverend Margaret Hepzibah.
You're being disruptive, Mr. Davis. If you do that again, you'll be asked to leave.
Request of Reverend Margaret Hepzibah to address council regarding justice.
Margaret, are you here? Okay, let's take the next person then, please.
216, request of Sharon Nassett to address council regarding homelessness.
Sharon? Okay, then let's move on to, sir, you're going to have to be quiet. Let us move on.
This is what happened.
Mr. Walsh, you're being disruptive. Unless you're quiet and let us proceed, you'll be excluded from the chamber, and that goes for you as well, sir. All right, I'm sorry. We're going to recess this meeting, and I'm going to ask the security folks to remove these two folks from the chamber. We'll be back in 5 minutes. please, and let's take item 217.
217, accept and appropriate a grant from the Oregon Office of Emergency Management Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant in the amount of $526,257 for the City of Portland Residential Seismic Strengthening Project.
Commissioner Novick.
Colleagues, citizens, this is an exciting day. We all know how hard Carmen and your team work to make the city resilient, to use Commissioner Fish's favorite word, expanding our net teams, and working on ways to address the risk posed by unreinforced masonry buildings, engaging the oil companies to talk about how we can make sure that our critical energy infrastructure doesn't collapse. And we also, of course, have done outreach to citizens to tell them what they can do to be ready. And one thing we say again and again is that they should be, in the words of the talking heads, bolting down the house. There are up to 100,000 homes in Portland that were built before there was a requirement to bolt the homes to their foundations. A few years ago, with the help of Congressman Blumenauer, we grabbed a leftover piece of an old FEMA grant to help a couple of dozen people retrofit their homes. And we've worked with Clean Energy Works now and Habit to provide long-term low-interest loans to pay for the portion of retrofit. They actually now do that for everybody, whether it's in the context of some grant agreement with FEMA or not. So this year, we asked FEMA for a standalone $500,000 grant to pay for half the cost of retrofitting 150 homes. Now, FEMA spends billions of dollars a year, as you know, responding to emergencies. Last year, they only allocated $30 million to pre-disaster mitigation projects. So, and most of that is allocated in some way and is not available for competitive project applications like this. So only about $11 million was available for competitive applications. So $500,000 is actually a significant percentage of the total amount that FEMA had available for this kind of project, which means that we were pretty darn competitive. This next year, Congress has seen fit to authorize $90 million for pre-disaster mitigation, and we hope that that's a trajectory that will continue, and in years to come, there will be billions allocated. And we're glad that we've got, we hope that we were establishing an ongoing claim to that money for this kind of work. So I'm just pleased as punch about this. Went to a house yesterday where, on Madison Street Southeast, where the homeowner was saying that she signed up to be one of the applicants for a grant because she read the New Yorker article and said, gosh darn it, we've got to do something. We actually had thousands of people sign up to apply. We can only accommodate 150, but that means that there's thousands of people who were able to get information about what they can do to retrofit their homes, which for most people only cost between $3,000 and $8,000. So now I'll shut up and turn it over to Carmen and to Tim Miller, the CEO of Inhabit.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor Carmen Merlot, Portland Bureau of Emergency Management. Before I start, I do have two non-material amendments I'd like to introduce. The first is under Section D. We're literally just rounding the dollar amount up to $526,257. The second amendment is part of the fiscal impact statement. We're correcting the first fund number and just adding two additional commitment items. So these are both non-material amendments, and I want to introduce that before we start. I'm so proud of this grant for a couple of reasons. As Commissioner Novick said, FEMA doesn't allocate very much money towards pre-disaster mitigation. We were the only funded project in FEMA Region 10, and we're one of only 3 seismic mitigation projects in the entire country. So we're really proud about this grant. One of our goals after an earthquake is to keep people in their homes. And that's because Hurricane Katrina taught us that when people are displaced from their homes, their neighborhoods, their city, the chances of them coming back are very small, and that slows down the city's economic and social recovery. So we're so proud about this grant and our partnership with Inhabit. When we announced the earlier press release to apply for the grant, it was coincidentally the same exact day that the story in the little-known magazine, The New Yorker, came out, and we received an overwhelming request for people who wanted to sign up. And so to tell you more about that project, I want to turn it over to Tim Miller from Inhabit.
Thank you, Carmen. Mayor, Commissioners, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning about this really important resilience work and the celebration of landing a grant from FEMA. Just a very quick background, since I know most of you are quite familiar with Inhabit, formerly Clean Energy Works. We were started in 2009 and 2010 right here in this building, and started off as Clean Energy Works Portland, and now we are Inhabit. And we've been collaborating with the city ever since. And we, as you know, got a federal grant and then follow-on state support to expand our work. And so we've built this infrastructure of a really expert team of folks who know how to work with homes and homeowners. And we have systems and things to help manage these projects and make it go smoothly for those homeowners. So while we're doing this resilience work and energy efficiency work, we're also creating great jobs. We have equity requirements in the jobs that we create, and we're more and more addressing homeowners who might not otherwise afford this work. So that's our work, and we've done about 5,000 homes in Oregon and 3,200 homes right here in Portland with our energy efficiency and other upgrades. And that, while we've been doing that, we've created over $74 million of great job-creating economic activity. So I'm really excited. I've joined the Commissioner Novick and Carmen in celebrating today because this is the result of 3 years of work. I checked back in my email records, and that's when the emails began on this whole effort. And we saw this vision that this energy work could be coupled with seismic work. Once you're in the home and sometimes opening up walls, it makes a lot of sense to, as the commissioner said, bolt down the house. And there was, fortunately, a prescriptive path already adopted by the city, adopted by BDS with FEMA guidance for very efficient, effective ways to address most homes without doing a whole lot of engineering work. So the prescriptive path was a key ingredient. We saw the big opportunity to combine this work together. We did a cost-benefit analysis in partnership with the state and with Carmen's team to look at what kinds of upgrades would be clear cost-benefit for the homeowners and have a good return on the investment in these homes. And so we built a program. We engaged contractors. We recruited a whole bunch of homeowners who wanted to do this work, and we did those first 23 homes, which you see here on this map. These are the first 23 homes, or a couple dozen homes that the commissioner referenced. With that success and a very successful collaboration and a good report to FEMA, we saw the chance to expand this, and so we put in for this next grant. As you heard, overwhelming response from Portlanders interested in doing this work. Thousands of people, frankly, signed up, so a huge increase in this awareness of the importance of this risk in the past year. So we're really excited to do this next wave. Monday we were at this home, as the commissioner mentioned, and met the family there and their interest in doing this work. By the way, in between this time, we've also done another 40 homes of people who didn't need any grant funding. People are going forward with this work without any support. You see the additional dots on the map here of the next wave of homes that did it without grant help. And so we met this family here that you see, and there are 5 kids, and it's a beautiful older home, typical Southeast Portland home. It needed this upgrade, and each of these homes that has this work done is really an island of resilience if we have an incident, and which is expected in the next few decades. These homes are also examples of resilience for their neighbors, showing how this work can be done, how it's not that expensive, how it's fairly simple to do this upgrade and have one's home protected for the future. Our homes are often our biggest asset, and if we can protect those with a small investment to keep the home inhabitable or repairable in the event of a big earthquake, it makes a huge difference. And actually it comes down to sometimes the difference between being displaced or being able to stay in Portland. So this is great work. From an equity perspective, half of the homes that will be addressed in this grant are below the median value of homes in Portland. So we're making sure to keep equity considerations in this work. With that, we have 6 contractors doing this work, and we're creating opportunities for those workers as well. Now, one other comment on this next wave of 150 homes, thanks to the FEMA grant, these homeowners will receive 50% incentives to do this work. It's a good example of how public investment can be paired with private capital and the financing that we help arrange for these homeowners to do this work and mobilize this activity. But we know that we can get a whole lot more homes done even with lower incentives. We don't need a full 50% incentive, at least not for some folks. For folks who wouldn't otherwise afford it, certainly those incentives are key. But with the huge interest from Portlanders in doing this work, we know we can get more work done and don't need a full 50% incentive. So we think there are opportunities here to make every public dollar go further in the future. The possibility of an additional investment from the city of Portland for another $500,000 would really multiply this impact from the federal grant, build on this infrastructure we've created, build on this process we've created, and get more homes done and more work done. You know, there are 100,000 homes in Portland that need this kind of work. There are older homes that are not attached to their foundation. And there's huge potential and leverage in doubling down on this FEMA grant if you so choose. But with your approval to accept this FEMA grant, we look forward to working with the homeowners and the contractors and with Carmen and her team to go do this good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Any questions?
Yes, I do. First, thank you very much, Director Merlot, for briefing me on this, and obviously it's a great program. I'm a little concerned, I didn't see the map before, and there are only 13 homes east of 205 that are on the list. So I'm wondering about the equating of lower than median home value with actual low-income families and communities of color, and how will you check on your equity analysis of who's benefiting?
I'll take the question first, and I'll pass it over to Tim. I think there's two reasons to account for that. One, keep in mind that many homes east of that 205 are actually newer homes and don't need this work. We also wanted to make sure that in order for the home to qualify, it has to be an eligible home that's capable of meeting the prescriptive requirements that are put out by the Bureau of Development Services. So if the house doesn't have a continuous foundation, if it's on a steep slope, if it's in a floodplain, it wouldn't qualify. But I think truly the answer for why there's so few homes on east of 205 is because they're, quite frankly, they are newer homes and don't need the retrofitting.
And I've loaded up here the next map, which shows the dots for the next 150 homes, so you can see that footprint a little more clearly. You see beginnings of some homes east of 205, but with Carmen's points taken.
So are you going to be tracking the demographics, both the income and ethnicity and racial makeup of the folks who get the benefit of this?
We didn't have the luxury of being able to track demographics. When we submitted the application, we had to have the homes pre-identified, and we did that through the 4,000 plus waiting list that we had after we did the press release. All we were able to get at that time was the address of the home, and then look at tax records. That is all we had the opportunity to do before we had to submit the application.
Right, and we're hoping this is going to snowball and continue to keep going. So it would be possible once folks show up to do the work for them to at least track who's inhabiting the house.
Yes.
And to ask, people don't have to give, but to ask about income so that you could give a report to council on who benefited from this so that we know moving forward how to refine the program to make sure that more people who are truly in need, not that these people aren't, these homes, obviously everyone needs to be done, so it's going to be a good start. I think though, given the limited funding, I know that you share our commitment, the council's commitment to making sure that we correct some of the mistakes of the past.
Yes, absolutely. We can ask those questions.
Carmen, I have a question.
Oh.
Sorry.
Commissioner, I just wanted to say that the ability of PBEM to do outreach to various communities or to anybody actually is limited by the fact that we're a 15-person bureau with only one person that does outreach of any kind. And maybe in the future we can take advantage of other bureaus' ability to do outreach and identify people in various communities who could benefit from similar work.
Be happy to partner with that. Obviously, Environmental Services is a much bigger bureau, but they do contract with some of the district coalitions, and we need to continue to expand working with the diverse civic leadership partners to facilitate that, and I'd certainly be happy to help with that.
Thank you.
Carmen, first of all, superb presentation, but it's got me thinking. So when we think about a healthy and safe home and where we touch potentially a homeowner or a renter. There's a whole array of things we care about. So I'm thinking just out loud, Commissioner Saltzman sends firefighters to knock on people's doors to make sure their smoke detector is working. And in the course of that conversation, they may identify other fire hazards like newspapers next to the fireplace or electrical outlets that are overburdened or whatever. So that's one thing. We know that there's some homes built between 1970 and 1985 that are, there is some risk that lead was used in the soldering. And there's some, there's a narrow window of homes, but we know that's a risk, and we communicate with them and tell them, you know, you should have your water checked. There's radon. There's this very outstanding effort to make sure the home is stable in the event of a seismic event. I wonder at some point if we could kind of create a laundry list of the things we care about, because with a great partner like you, I would like to see how much of this we can leverage off of one visit. And one of the challenges we often have, particularly as you're talking about an older property owner or renter, the challenge you have is the trust factor of getting in the door,
Right.
which is why Commissioner Saltzman is bullish on having a firefighter make that contact, because a firefighter can often build a trusting relationship and get into someone's house, you know, be invited in. So what I would urge us to do is maybe think holistically about whatever, the 10 things that the county and the city care about, particularly with struggling homeowners, and how might we leverage the relationship? Because as long as we've got someone getting in the house doing one thing, you know, your folks are eminently qualified to expand the scope of what they do. And there may actually be a huge benefit to the city of that marginal dollar that we put in, and the checklist of things that we check for, because we want to make sure they're safe today and in the future there's an event. So
Yeah,
food for thought.
That's a good suggestion, and you know, we're contemplating bringing forward to council this idea of requiring disclosure of seismic and energy performance for houses, as we now do for commercial buildings. And so if we do that, we ought to do that, you know, holistically as well. What are the really important things that need to be disclosed to a potential purchaser of a building, in this case, a house? Seismic is obviously one of them. Energy is obviously another. How far down that road do we go? It's worth having the conversation.
And if you've already got a relationship with Inhabit, I'm just thinking out loud, you know, maybe the Water Bureau figures that there's for a reasonable additional incremental cost, we could do outreach about, have you had your water tested? Have you thought about these various options?
Yeah, it's worth looking into.
Great
Good
suggestion,
questions.
thank you.
So we'll see if anyone else wants to speak on this item. Commissioner Novick moves the housekeeping amendments that
Second.
Carmen has provided to us. Any further discussion about the amendments?
Actually, there's an additional housekeeping amendment that we need. One more time, we have to thank the eagle eye of Commissioner Fritz. We have a leftover emergency clause from the previous item. The council declares an emergency exists because the close date for this grant application is August 28th.
Right.
I think that we should revise that to an emergency exists because, Carmen, I'm sleepy, can you help me by suggesting some emergency language?
Well, the sooner that we can get this grant approved, the sooner we can start reaching out to the homeowners and start scheduling the contract work.
Second.
That sounds like a fine rationale.
So we have three amendments in effect.
Friendly amendments to improve the ordinance. Okay, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak on this item? So let's act on the amendments first. Roll call vote, please, on those.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman. Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye, and on the ordinance as amended.
Fritz.
Well, thank you to Director Merlo, to our valued community partner, and especially to Commissioner Novick, who is the most enthusiastic person on this particular issue that I have come across in a long time. I'm happy to report that my house, built in 1991, is bolted to its foundation. I recently discovered that at the urging of Director Merlo. And now others will be able to look and see whether their homes need retrofitting. I do believe, as I mentioned, that we need to be very mindful of who is benefiting from these scarce resources, and I know that Director Merlo and her staff and Commissioner Novick share that concern, as does Inhabit. So it's a great thing, and thank you for putting it on the time-certain agenda to bring attention to it. Aye.
Fish.
Thanks for the presentation. We really appreciate the partnership. I remember when we launched that relationship, six or 7 years ago, and it's been a fantastic relationship. And
Thank you.
perhaps there's a way to expand it as we've discussed. And I just want to say, Mayor, the other day I had a chance to attend a disaster policy council meeting, and I'm ready to award Carmen the best in class in terms of managing a meeting in city government. Boy, does she run a meeting efficiently and effectively. So thank you for your service. Aye.
Saltzman,
Well, congratulations on getting this FEMA grant. It sounds like it was really hard fought after, and we're lucky to have received so much. And appreciate the partnership with Inhabit to help make more seismically retrofitted homes. Aye.
Novick,
In addition to thanking Carmen and her team and Tim, I'd like to once again thank Jay Hutchins and Carol Studenman, who drew this issue of unbolted houses to my attention in late 2011, or maybe it was early 2012. Thank the folks at FEMA Region 10 that fought for this item for us at the national level. And again, thanks to Catherine Schultz of The New Yorker for writing an article that happened to break the day we asked people to put in their names and houses for this application, so that we had 5,000 applicants. Aye.
Hales,
Well, $526,257 is a lot of money, but it's just a start at the cost of this really big job. And so I know that may seem a little daunting, maybe not to you two, but to some of us. But you think back on issues like recycling and energy conservation, some small efforts at the beginning did create momentum, and then people took off on their own, as you described. So I think this is going to be catalytic of that kind of progress, and I really appreciate the fact that we're getting this good start. So thank you all very much. Aye. Thank you.
you
Well
very
done.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item, please.
did you want to do the consent agenda real quick?
I'm sorry?
Get rid of the consent agenda?
Oh, okay, yes, let's do the consent agenda, sorry. Yes, I don't think there are any with some removals from the consent calendar, so consent agenda as printed.
Fritz,
Aye.
Fish,
Aye.
Saltzman,
Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Hales.
Aye, thank you. Okay, now we can do the next item.
Item 218, recognize the exceptional diplomatic service of Japan Consul General Hiroshi Furusawa to Portland and our region.
Well, I want to welcome, please, Consul General Furusawa, come forward and have a seat with us here this morning. And I'll read this proclamation, and we'll talk about you a little bit and give you a chance to rebut a little bit. It's an honor to have our Consul General here this morning, Hiroshi Furusawa. He has served us as Consul General in Portland now for almost 3 years, from May of 2013 to this month, which is longer than the usual 2-year term in the diplomatic service. And he has, in that time, really built exceptional ties between Japan and Oregon and with Portland. We want to thank you for your service. We want to do something that we haven't actually done in 12 years. So I will read a proclamation that has a special element, something that the city of Portland has not done in a while. It says this, it says, whereas Consul General of Japan, Hiroshi Furusawa, has demonstrated years of excellent diplomatic service in Portland, working to strengthen the bonds between Portland and Japan since assuming his post in 2013 at the Consular Office of Japan in Portland. And whereas Consul General Furusawa has been instrumental in fostering strong relationships and has worked tirelessly to increase cultural, educational, and economic development opportunities of mutual benefit for Japan and Portland. And whereas Consul General Furusawa has honored Portland by presenting the Japan Foreign Minister's commendation to Mr. Adolf Hertrick of Vanport Manufacturing in 2013, Kei Endo, a veteran of Portland Japanese American Community in 2013, Stephen Bloom of the Portland Japanese Garden in 2015, and the U.S. Wheat Associates for their long service in supplying high-quality wheat to Japan in 2015. And whereas Consul General Furusawa has been a strong advocate for the Portland Japanese Garden Cultural Crossing Project and has contributed greatly to the success of the Portland Japanese Garden 50th Anniversary and the Portland Art Museum Legendary Samurai exhibit. And whereas the Consul General has been a champion of the Japanese Immersion Program in Portland Public Schools, has been an important ally to the Center for Japanese Studies at Portland State University, and encouraged the creation of an endowment fund for the center. And whereas Consul General Furusawa recognized the Portland-Sapporo Sister City Association with the Consul General's commendation in 2015 in recognition of Portland's oldest sister city relationship and its initiatives that sustained strong ties between Portland and Sapporo, Japan. And whereas the city of Portland was honored by the visit of the Japanese ambassador to the United States, who at the invitation of the Consul General attended the Garden Anniversary celebration and the Samurai exhibit opening. Now, therefore, I, Charlie Hales, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim Consul General Hiroshi Furusawa an honorary citizen of Portland and extend our deepest gratitude to you for your service here. Thank you so much. Honorary Citizen Furusawa, we're welcome. Any comments you have about your service in Portland and your reflections on this city that loves you very much? We love having you here and we'll miss you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be recognized as such a distinguished award. I don't have any word of rebutting here. One thing, this city is very special, very special place for me. As you know, I have served New York, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, besides this city. I don't mean to say negative words about the other cities, but this city, the people of Portland, gave me a really special, very special assistant for me to work very positively, and the other things you mentioned became very easily possible, and I thoroughly enjoyed the work and living here in the city. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. I don't know how to say hard act to follow in Japanese, but that's what you are.
Anyone can do it.
Well, we want to take a photo with you, and you have a whole bunch of friends here in the council chambers today. We'd like to invite them to join you. We have representatives of the Japan America Society of Oregon, the Portland Japanese Garden, Shukukai, which is the Japanese Business Association of Portland, the Sapporo Sister City Association, and the Portland Art Museum, among others. So we'd like to invite all your friends to come forward with you and take a picture, please. Come on. Take one photo. Please come join us. John? Show, Sean. Please. Good morning, everyone. Portland support team.
Get very friendly with each other.
That's much closer.
Will you be coming back to the opening of the Japanese garden? Of course. What was it? Thank you for your service. Great. Thanks, everyone, for being here for Hiroshi.
John, thank you.
It's great. Thank you. Great. Thank you for coming. I'll see some of you tomorrow, I hope. All right, we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. And we are at regular agenda, item 226.
Allow city subsidized affordable housing projects to utilize a Type 2X land use review procedure pursuant to PCC 33.730.025 for the duration of the housing emergency.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. This resolution, oh, could you read the ordinance too, Carla? Can we do them both
Go
at
ahead and
once?
read 227 too also.
Yeah.
227, direct the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to develop a legislative proposal to amend Title 33 as part of Regulatory Improvement Code Amendment Package, RICAP number 8, to simplify regulations, remove regulatory obstacles, and expedite processes for land use reviews and permits for affordable housing projects, mass shelters, and short-term housing.
Thank you. Thanks, Carla. This resolution and ordinance will further the city council's commitment to addressing our affordable housing emergency. It also represents one of the many collaborative outcomes between the Housing Bureau and the Bureau of Development Services to expand our city stock of affordable housing. And I'd like to thank Mayor Hills for his support of these efforts and his co-sponsorship of these items. And the resolution directs the Planning Bureau to conduct a legislative process to identify other opportunities to increase affordable housing through the land use process. And the ordinance establishes a new type of review process for affordable housing projects only. And here to explain more is our Housing Director, Kurt Krieger, and Development Services Director, Paul Scarlett, and Rebecca Esau's here always to keep us honest, keep us on tack. So please take it away.
Very good. Thank you very much, Commissioner Saltzman, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Kurt Krieger, and I'd like to at least remind you that on September 15th, the council had a study session on what we termed at that time the high cost of affordable housing. We invited 5 expert witnesses to join me in that panel conversation. Michael Parkhurst from the Meyer Memorial Trust, Jessica Woodruff, Reach Community Development Corporation's Development Director, Jill Sherman, a partner with Gertie Edelin Development, David Carbonneau, a private developer and principal in Home First Development, and Mike Steffen, the general manager of Walsh Construction. We're all here. And just to refresh your memory and for the record, we evaluated all the current data as it related to housing prices of affordable housing, and we were able to isolate the cost drivers of affordable housing. Some 77% of the costs were hard costs. That is land, building, and labor principally. 14% of the cost of affordable housing was in what we call soft costs. That's architecture and engineering fees, it's interest, it's taxes, legal expenses, and the like. And 9% are what we termed at that time social benefit costs. And social benefit costs is a basket of goods that are in fact applied by local government or state government to achieve social aims as a part of the development. Those include design review. And that conversation that we had on September 15th was an open, frank conversation about ways in which we could improve and bend the cost curve by specifically looking at the social benefit costs. Those are within your purview as policymakers. Design review was identified as a potential area for 3 principal concerns. One was that there was no time certain by which a project ever exits design review. There are design guidelines, and BDS will describe those to you, but projects were going into design review, recommended changes were made, they would come back, the applicants would come back with having made those recommended changes, and more recommended changes were then made. So there seemed to be sort of an interminable feedback loop that was created in that process, which was created uncertainty and added costs. The second, speaking of costs, is that while the design standards that are created by planning and sustainability are embedded in policy, there is no cost consideration. The Design Commission is not tasked with that job. And so there was a debate about the type of materials without an offsetting conversation about what those materials actually cost. And I'd be happy to talk specifically about some examples about costs that were added as a part of design review. The third issue that seemed to be an issue was one of standing, and that is that these projects all are in a physical location. They have neighborhood interests, but the record is open for anyone to come comment as a design critic, and many do, that are not necessarily vested in the specific outcomes of a specific project. They may not be property owners, they may not be neighbors even of the locality, but they're given equal standing, which creates a lot of uncertainty for applicants. So during the discussion that we had last fall, Caritas, which is the nonprofit associated with the Archdiocese of Portland, had a project at St. Francis Parish. It's called St. Francis Park. They are co-developing that with Home Forward. And the project underwent design review. The exterior cladding of the building was changed as a result of design review, and the project cost $400,000 more as a result. It did get processed within the proscribed time, so it wasn't delayed unnecessarily, but the costs are real. And it's important that you realize that this is a project that's funded by the Portland Housing Bureau, so those cost overages are essentially paid for by public funds. We are respectful that the design commissioners and their cohorts, the landmark commissioners, are citizens. They're giving of their time freely. They're very thoughtful and they're very deliberative. So it's not to diminish sort of the value added, but to put it in perspective, to recognize that we do have a housing emergency and that the changes recommended to you today are in effect a way by which to beta test in a short term between now and this fall process improvements that could result in more affordable housing more quickly. I can go into more detail, but I'd like Paul to talk a little bit about the specifics.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Paul Scarlett, Director for Bureau of Development Services. I'll just share a couple of summary remarks, and I'll turn it over to Rebecca to go into more details about the difference between what's proposed, Type 2X, and existing requirement Type 3. First, we are very supportive of the efforts that the city is involved in addressing the housing emergency and working very closely and collaboratively with the Portland Housing Bureau and staff to address and come up with processes and efficiencies to allow for these projects to be built and completed. One of the proposal that is in front of you is one that was identified as a way to speed up the process, to reduce delay, and also to reduce cost. The Type 2X is one that would allow for staff administrative process decision versus going to a public hearing. And so that in itself would save time and money. As Kurt said, we are appreciative of the members of the Historic Landmarks and the Design Commission. This is in no way reflective of the work they're doing or not doing. It's in response to an emergency, and how can we get housing that are city subsidized, located in Central City and the Gateway through the development review and land use review process quicker. And so through conversation and deliberation, this is a tool that's been identified. We feel it will be beneficial in a lot of ways. It will run the course of the declaration through August, October. And we're looking and will be partnering with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on how this could be maybe a more permanent process. That's through the resolution, which they kind of work in conjunction with each other. Just an example for fees differences. In the Type 3, which these fees are based on project valuation. And so if you're building a apartment building, the cost of the project stipulates the type or the amount of review fee. So Type 3 ranges from about $9,000 to $31,000. And that includes BDS fees, the infrastructure bureau fees to review these projects. Type 2X would reduce that amount down to $5,000 to $9,000 on the high end. That's a savings of about $4,000 to $22,000. That's huge. And of course, the timelines varies as well. So just to give you a little bit of context of some of the differences, Rebecca, our land use division manager, is of course more astute with all the technicalities of the differences in the land use review processes and policies and so forth. So I'll turn it over to her. Thank you.
I would like to emphasize that in no way are we lowering the standards or the bar of what we expect as far as design and design quality. The regulations are staying the same as far as the approval criteria and the design guidelines that apply. It's only the procedure that we're using to review those projects that is proposed to be changed from a type 3 to a 2X. And the basic differences between those review procedures, a type 3 requires a mandatory hearing. The hearing is required to take place within 51 days of a complete application. For a type 2X, there is no hearing, it's a staff level decision, and the decision needs to be made within 42 days of a complete application. It only goes to a hearing if it's appealed, and that would be to the Design Commission or the Landmarks Commission. If a type 3 is appealed, it goes to City Council. And the way this ordinance is drafted is it's an option for an applicant. They can still choose to use the type 3 design review process if they want to, which preserves their right to then have an appeal that goes to City Council if they want to get to you. But they have the option to use the 2X instead and get through the process more quickly.
Where does the 2X get appealed to?
If it's a design review, it'll be appealed to the Design Commission, and if it's a historic resource review, to the Historic Landmarks Commission. And if those hearings bodies, then if their decision is appealed, it goes to LULA. It never comes to City Council.
So there is still the potential for a hearing before a public body in the city of Portland
Yes.
with the 2X?
Yes.
Perhaps to animate the conversation a little bit, this requires projects to be publicly funded through the Portland Housing Bureau. And so it's a narrow window of opportunity. We looked at our pipeline as to projects that we've underwritten, who are currently in design development, and who are at the stage of development, which this would provide them with an option. And neither have decided whether or not to take the 2X, but I think it's important that you know who they are and what they are. The 14th and Raleigh property that is owned by the Portland Housing Bureau has been assigned to Innovative Housing, Inc. as the master developer. They've developed a plan for 93 units in a 12-story building. Of those, 44 units, or 47%, are for people between 0 to 30% of median income, so it's extremely low income. The design architect is Alex Salazar, and the architect of record is LRS Architecture. They currently have had design advice consultations with staff. They have not yet gone through the formal process. The second option, which is also viable in the current time frame, is River Place Parcel 3, which is also owned by the Portland Housing Bureau. We've assigned the development rights of that project to a team of Bridge Housing and Williams and Dame Development. It is a mixed income property of 203 affordable units and 162 market rate units, with approximately 31,000 square foot of retail in the south waterfront area. Of those, 90 units are 44%, or for people between 0 and 30% of median income. So both have an extreme amount of public value. They're both in strategic locations. One's in the Pearl, one's in the south waterfront. And I must say that both developers have already engendered conversations with the immediate affected neighborhoods about project design. So whichever process they select, this will not be news to any of the neighborhood residents, because they've already had multiple meetings on this.
And the design guidelines in the Central City and Gateway remains, and these projects are required to meet those guidelines, so that doesn't change.
And one more piece of the ordinance, the type 2X, as part of this ordinance, would require that the applicant apply for a design advice request. This is a form of early assistance to ensure that the applicant, before they spend a lot of time working on their design, they can bring their conceptual design to the Design Commission or the Historic Landmarks Commission to get feedback on the conceptual design, as well as get information from the infrastructure bureaus about what requirements apply, similar to a pre-application conference. So there's no surprises later on that could cost a lot of money and time.
I have a few questions.
Questions? Go ahead, please.
Has this concept been floated by the DRAC or Landmarks or Planning and Sustainability
Or Design Commission.
or Design Commission? Are any of our advisory bodies that normally weigh in on this, have they been asked to comment?
Yes, and we have letters from both the Design Commission and the Historic Landmarks Commission that was just handed right before I came up, so I haven't had a chance to read that, but I've heard that they do have some concerns about this. And I'm not sure if you're taking testimony today, but
Yeah,
they
we're
are
taking
here.
testimony.
Well, have
And I
they-
met with some design commissioners and landmark commissioner yesterday, too, about this.
All right, so has there been a formal presentation at DRAC, at Landmarks, or at the Design Commission about this proposal? Or
They've both reviewed the proposed ordinances, and they both commented on them. Housing Bureau did not make a formal presentation, but they seem to be fully conversant about the effect of the policies. We'd be happy to respond to questions perhaps after their testimony.
I haven't received any feedback from any of the oversight bodies, but I guess we now have a letter and we'll have some testimony, so we'll get a chance to hear that. Mr. Director, would you remind me again, what's the trigger for which kinds of projects, development, is eligible for this expedited process?
Well, there are a couple of threshold requirements. They must be directly subsidized by the Portland Housing Bureau. That means they must have received a financial commitment from the Bureau. In both of the instances I gave you, we have done so. It happens that we also own both of the underlying sites, so we're even more deeply embedded in those projects. It would not apply, for instance, to a project indirectly assisted by the city through a tax exemption.
Well, you beat me to it, so that's important. So if it's a project that qualifies for a multi-tax abatement or something, that would not be eligible.
Not under this current iteration, although the second of these two companions requests planning and sustainability to come back with a permanent ordinance. They could choose to examine the indirect assistance provided.
I think they're qualitatively different, and I would at least need to know more. I'd have to have a deeper conversation. So you've in your presentation, you've been very clear that there's no dilution of design standards. And I want to pick up on that for a second, because one of the noteworthy things about city-owned or city-invested affordable housing is that it is typically not what communities rail against. That is, when you hear from folks in East Portland about crappy housing that is not designed in a way that's sensitive or respectful of the community, it is often the private market housing that's been slapped up and that looks like if a good windstorm comes, it'll be knocked down. Some of the most durable, long-term, and beautiful housing is the housing that the city has partnered with a nonprofit developer to build, and I can give you 1,000 examples. So can you ensure us, and by the way, I think that when we're using public dollars to invest in affordable housing, we should approach that just like we're building a public library or a transportation hub or anything else. I think we should take great pride in creating a space that's functional and also that is a community amenity. And even if you disagree with that on aesthetic grounds, I will tell you that the community buy-in and the community acceptance goes through the roof when it's something that people are proud of. And if you don't even accept that, I will tell you that better designed, better built buildings last longer. So from a taxpayer point of view, we can say that there's a return. And the problem with not getting it right at the front end is there's no going back. And there's a certain building at the bridgehead that reminds me of that every day I go to work. We can't demolish that building, but it's an eyesore, and it's not what was intended. So can you ensure us during this pilot project that there will be no dilution of the kinds of existing and sensible design standards which help us produce functional as well as attractive buildings?
I think we both probably need to respond.
You just need to say yes.
I definitely want to affirm your statement that affordable housing is not inferior housing. We don't need to cut corners with respect to the durability of materials or amenities. What we build today will last 100 years, and we need to be thinking in that regard. What I do want to underscore is that in addition to having direct financing, the projects must be 5 or more units. We selected that 5-unit threshold because that is the HUD standard for multifamily housing. 4 or fewer units is regarded as single-family in the HUD lexicon, 5 or more as multifamily. And the incomes must be below 60% of median income. So this at least differentiates between projects that might be more than 60, although the two examples that I gave you are well under that.
I think what you said is important because we're talking about the public purpose, but I'm still focused on making sure that while we potentially cut red tape and create certainty, we're not degrading the kind of quality standards that people expect when a development comes to their community.
And I'll let Paul and Rebecca follow up.
Sure, that's a good question and concern. BDS is focused on reviewing projects that, or for sure, meeting the development standards, the design guideline. We would be looking at affordable housing similar as we would in private development and making sure those requirements are being met. That's the passion and the professional approach from all staff working in the design and historic section. So that's something we can commit to because that's what we do. And I believe you can be assured that that's what we would be doing in this case.
You said there were potentially 3 answers. Are we all in accord on that?
As I said earlier, we have no intention of lowering the bar on the design standards, and we would hold them to the same standard we currently hold all type 3 and any review we do. The design guidelines apply regardless of which procedure we're using.
Could I just offer an example, Mayor? Once upon a time, I think it was called Block U, there was a proposal for a suburban-style development over by the train station, like a 2 or 3 story building that covered the entire lot, and it was to be the future home of what we now know as Bud Clark Commons. Because of an extensive public review process, some members of the development community said to us we were nuts to a low-rise suburban-style building in an urban setting. And in fact, a good friend of Charlie's and mine on a cocktail, on a napkin at a breakfast meeting, redesigned it for me. And he said, you stack it and take make it an urban form building, put it on Broadway, stack it, and create a bonus lot. That bonus lot is now going to be a county health building, so we're going to have 2 urban form buildings. Then through that public process, some people had a concern about the color schemes and some of the discrete design elements, and they were changed to what we now have as sort of the salt and pepper look of Bud Clark Commons. Suffice it to say, there were some very, very important decisions made about the design that came from a public process. One that actually created enormous public value, because if we had eaten up the whole lot with the wrong building, we would not have had the opportunity to partner with the county on a county health department building. So I don't know how much of that came through what level of review, but I just offer that as an example that while we want to give certainty and we want to move things along, we're also building for 100 years, and we want to make sure we get it right. And so I want to make sure that we have the right balance here between certainty and getting through the regulatory process and also protecting a value that Portland cares about, which is beautiful and functional.
Indeed. I think, the challenge of the Design Commission, and I'm sure they'll speak to this, is that the standards to which they are charged with administering can be subjectively applied. For example, when it comes to material selection, the exterior of the building is, quote, to be of good quality material. That leaves a great deal of interpretation. In the innovative housing project conversation, they specified a 22 gauge steel exterior clad material. Design advice came back, said we'd like to see 18 gauge steel. Well, that sounds maybe like inside baseball, but that's a $395,000 difference in the project. And it really has no material effect whatsoever on what it looks like. It's the thickness of the steel in a fine grain manner. So I think the standards themselves could be a little bit more clear, perhaps, and some materials that are currently not able to pass through design review are commonly used in the private sector, and they're commonly found throughout Portland without getting into other instances. But the project will look no different under the Type 2X project than the Type 3.
So last question then. because I want to just make sure what's before us and what isn't before us. So the other areas where people have argued that we could get some savings would be to do things like change the rules in terms of the kinds of compensation for the workers at the site. So work with potentially the state to alter the prevailing wage law application. Or another thing I read recently was a critique of our green building policy, and it's as being an additional cost that we could weaken. And then finally, there are some who say that the opportunity agenda for the city builds in costs because we're not building in the cheapest dirt, which is sort of the point, that we want to build in high opportunity areas in order for people to have meaningful choice. Does any of the stuff before us today address those three values?
May I address that? Because I have something that may be helpful, which my Chief of Staff, Tim Crail, brought to my attention. I think we should be considering these two ordinances like the tree code ordinances last week. This first one is a stopgap measure to make some immediate changes. The second ordinance directs the Bureau of Planning to go and look at all of those issues that you just mentioned, Commissioner. And I think that's what I see we're doing here. Is that correct?
That's
Ordinance
correct.
is a stopgap, resolution is to study it further. That's correct.
Well, and just to
All the
clarify,
issues.
in September, we did talk about the entire basket of social benefit costs, and BOLI, the split wage rate, sustainability, trip reduction, minority and women-owned business enterprise set-asides, the trip reduction strategies developed in concert with PBOT, with public comment, our focus on opportunity areas, including the bedroom sizes, because we're promoting family housing at a greater cost of perhaps studio and very small micro units. So we don't intend to revisit any of those other costs in this short-term measure. In the longer-term measure, there's some of the issues of sustainability could come up. BOLI is a separate issue. It's a state wage rate, letter opinion of the Labor Commissioner. We would like to see it applied differently than it is, but I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So one of the, and I appreciate Commissioner Fritz pointing this out for me. So in the second item we're going to take up, we are directing planning and sustainability to review some of these other cost drivers, kind of below the line cost drivers, and including in that is a consideration as to whether Commissioner Salzman's green building policy will apply to affordable housing. I want to make sure I understand that.
I think it's a fair conversation to have, and we'll be happy to have that with them, yes.
Why is it a fair conversation? Before the council says we want to undo a policy that Dan put into law and defended for 17 years, why are we asking someone to revisit it?
Well, I don't think we're asking the Planning and Sustainability, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the Planning and Sustainability Commission to look at the mix of things that may inhibit the delivery of affordable housing. And I think the green building policy it's always been a source of debate in the affordable housing arena, and I think it's a fair debate to have. And I welcome the Planning and Sustainability Commission taking a look at it. And
And then we get to say whether to change it or not.
Yeah, it's ultimately up to us.
All right.
One more thing to add, the resolution is written to only direct the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to amend Title 33. That doesn't deal with labor or, rates of pay and all that kind of thing. It's written very broadly to remove obstacles and find ways to expedite projects that deal with mass shelters, affordable housing, and short-term housing.
I'll just say for the record, this is the first time I can remember on my watch on the council where we've said that we're going to ask someone to evaluate whether we should backtrack on our sustainability goals as to one class of housing as a way of saving money. And that's not the standard that we apply in any other setting. So if Commissioner Salzman thinks it's worthy of a review, but we are setting a precedent here of saying that the marginal cost at the front end may not be of value, even though we have generally documented long-term savings, and we're doing that in the context of an emergency. I have some concern with the council affirmatively saying that's the direction we want to go.
Well,
I believe what we're saying
those are your
is-
words, Commissioner, not mine.
No.
We're asking the Planning and Sustainability, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, do an honest review, and that means nothing is off the horizon for them to look at.
And
And I
actually,
personally
it's not
com-
the first time. The city used to have a very aggressive solar access requirement for single-family homes. It turned out to not be very cost-effective in practice, and so previous city council discarded it.
That's a bad example, Mayor.
Well, it happened. I think we're capable of learning, from what works and what doesn't work.
There's
So
one difference.
asking the question.
There's one critical difference. We're asking them to evaluate, reviewing, and potentially reducing standards, not to for-profit housing, but to social housing. So that is a difference.
It is
We're
a
not,
difference.
we're not asking them to consider whether this is a cost burden on any other housing.
Commissioner, I think I'm confident that when they do the review, that it's going to come back that, yes, indeed, it is worth the investment.
It's worth asking the
So-
question.
I have a few other, yes, I believe one of the elephants in the room is that the commissioner in charge of housing is also in charge of development services. And under other circumstances, I might be concerned about that. Having seen Commissioner Saltzman and the way he manages his bureaus, I am not at all concerned that he's going to be directing his staff in development services to approve affordable housing projects just to get them done. He has a history of respecting the process, respecting the land use review, and indeed respecting his staff in development services. And so I personally am confident that he will continue to allow the staff, who I have found to be absolutely excellent in the design review section, as in the rest of development services, to do their work without interference. So I just wanted to state that on the record, and thank you all for the work that you do. The second is that the Design Commission's letter says that if this ordinance passes, staff will be making final land use decisions on significant projects. As Rebecca Esau just told us, that's not the case, that these type 2Xs are appealed to the Design Commission, so citizens would have the final say. The council would not. As was pointed out, applicants, if they prefer their chances with the City Council rather than the Design Commission, can start with the Design Commission and come to us. So it seems to me that this is an appropriate switch, at least pending hearing testimony, and also looking at it as a stopgap measure rather than something that we're enacting as a permanent basis. There's then a burden on the process and on the staff to prove that, in fact, we haven't reduced the standards or diminished the design of affordable housing in the pilot project. So that's the way I'm looking at it. My biggest concern is about the change, that this change would, I was glad to see that it requires the city subsidy of at least 5 units at 60% of median family income or less. I'm wondering what's to stop a developer from going through the 2X process with the city subsect to then say, oh, never mind, I'm actually going to build luxury condos instead. And they've already got the approval for the design, and they then don't give us the affordable housing.
Well, there's currently nothing in the pipeline that fits into that category. The 2 instances that I mentioned, we swept our entire pipeline of projects, and those 2 are the only that are sort of timely and within the 2 areas of interest. We have nothing in Gateway at the present time, and those 2 others are in the central city. Looking forward, I think we'll be mindful of that potential abuse as planning and sustainability comes up with their recommendations to ensure.
That really doesn't.
Well, there's a clawback
Sure.
provision with any project that we have to be able to claw back our public funds if they have leveraged those public funds for private gain. And I think we would have to take an enforcement action against.
Well, no, this is before they actually do it. They get the design review checked off, the building looks lovely, and then they say, well, thank you, city, I don't want the public funds. I'm going to go ahead and build luxury housing instead.
There's an easy way to do that, and you can encumber the property with a lien at the outset to ensure that a specified number of units are provided that are affordable, and that's
She's not worried about, she's worried about, but I think you're worried about the design quality question, right?
No, I'm worried about getting the design approval
Right.
and then changing the project, reducing the public subsidy. What's to stop a developer from doing a bait and switch?
We'll be mindful of that risk, and we'll insure against it.
How?
We can have a regulatory agreement with the police powers of the city behind it, and we can enforce a regulatory
They
agreement.
haven't gotten the approval yet.
But they would have had to have public funds in the project. And the public funds only come with with the security of a development agreement, and that a development agreement can be a lien on the title. So we can claw back.
So you could put something in the development agreement.
Mhm.
Help me out, Development Services staff. How would you then rescind the design approval if the project changes?
There's a provision in the zoning code in the 700s chapter that talks about a reconsideration, and I think it could be used for this situation where we would basically withdraw our approval of the design review because it hadn't gone through the appropriate procedure.
And what would trigger that?
When we saw a building permit that came in and we were alerted from the Housing Bureau that, they are not going to do the affordable housing they said they were going to do.
So you could have some kind of a flag within,
We have meetings now every 2 weeks with Housing Bureau staff on all of their projects and the status of all of their projects, so we're coordinating very closely.
so you're confident that you would be able to catch and then rescind the design approval?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm
Then my-
also going to offer an amendment on that 5 units after we hear some testimony from one of our design commissioners.
My final point, I just want to put on the record that the council, in the context of the comprehensive plan, has been discussing making affordable housing the public benefit for bonuses, for example. And so I want to be very clear and maybe get some head nods from my fellow commissioners. We're not making decisions on the comprehensive plan. However, we have been having significant discussions about affordable housing as a public benefit. And I want to be clear that that's partly why this is coming towards us, and that is something for the Design Commission and others to consider, that that's the direction that council may be heading in the comprehensive plan.
Head nodding provided.
Thank you.
Can I pick up on, Steve, go ahead.
Actually, I have a couple of questions. For one thing, I was going to ask about the 5 units, but Commissioner Saltzman says he's going to address that. This is more related to 227 than 226, but we've already, I think all of us, asked the bureaus that engage in permitting to prioritize affordable housing. What I've heard is that we've also asked them to prioritize other things like ITAP and the docks project, et cetera. So I think that we need to be sure that we're all telling our people in the permitting bureaus, here is what the priority ranking is, and we recognize you'll spend less time on X when you're spending more time on Y. And we should make sure that that's a consistent message throughout the bureaus, because we don't want it being interpreted differently, resulting in things getting clogged that weren't supposed to. One question I have is, how transparent can we be? If you prioritize one thing, you're deprioritizing others. So how transparent can we be with the development community about saying, you can expect your non-affordable housing projects to be pushed back by X weeks because of this? And one sub-question is, when we're prioritizing affordable housing, does that mean that projects that are non-affordable housing projects that are currently in the queue and have been told that you expect that they will have the project completed within X weeks, will the affordable housing projects jump the queue so that those projects in the queue will be pushed back? So there's, sorry for the rambling question, but I think you get what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. I appreciate the question and concern. It's competing priorities, and so at some point it becomes philosophical versus realistic, because there's so much capacity, limited capacity. So what we've done as a solution is to add more staff and communicate the sort of priority reality that if you want to focus on ITAP, and you want to focus on affordable housing, you want to focus on something else, if you're trying to do it with the same number of staff, it just doesn't work. So we need to add staff, and that's been an issue with us. Fortunately, the economy is good, so we can add staff to realize those priorities. Maybe in other bureaus, that conversation needs to be had yet. I think that's part of the issue.
I would also say that, call to your attention that late yesterday, Commissioner Saltzman circulated a joint memo from Director Scarlett and myself, and that very point is addressed on page 2 of that memo, which talks about the entire spectrum of process improvements that we're implementing between the two bureaus. So affordable projects will be tracked, and they will be tracked by BDS as well as water and PBOT and environmental services. So they all have a role to play in this processing. So we're mindful that when a decision is made to prioritize one project and another project is given a lesser priority, or I'm not sure that the system really allows you to then put an alert out to the next project in line to say that you'll be 3 days later than you would have been normally, as long as it occurs within the same allotted time that this council has established as a benchmark.
We might not be able to be that specific project by project, but I do think it would be useful if we tried to provide whatever information we can to the development community saying, you've heard that we're prioritizing affordable housing. You might have some concerns about what that'll mean for non-affordable housing projects. Here is what we think we can expect based on what we know now. Here's what we're tracking. We will update you on what the impact will be on you as we go along.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can pull some information together for that.
Mr. Director, going back to Commissioner Fritz's question about how do you enforce the terms of the bargain? You know, it sounded, I don't know how this quite fits, but we use regulatory agreements to ensure compliance with 60-year affordability on deals that we work on. What in this instance, what is the minimum requirement for long-term affordability that we're asking of the developer?
This is 60% of AMI, 60 years at a minimum.
Subject to a regulatory agreement?
That's correct.
And so, to her question about, you know, potentially a bait and switch at some point, when do you enter into in terms of the timeline, when do you enter into a regulatory agreement, and when does the design review process conclude?
Well, I think it depends on the underlying land. In both of the two examples I gave you, we have fee title to the real estate. So we still control that real estate, although we have assigned the development rights to the selected teams. So we have more leverage in those instances where we own the underlying real estate. If it's a privately owned site that we don't have fee title to, then we have to ensure that the development agreement is in place. It would normally come fairly late in the process, once the final terms and conditions and the final finance is put into form. We might need an interim security instrument to avoid the sort of opportunism that Commissioner Fritz has identified.
Something that, even if it's a short version, that says you understand that this benefit is being afforded to you because you've agreed to follow these terms.
Correct.
And the final agreement is going to contain a regulatory agreement with a 60-year covenant. That does have provisions for us to claw back and get damages if there's a breach. So I think her point's very well taken.
Agreed.
I guess just one other clarification, and then we'll wait to hear Dan's amendment. You said that it only applies to projects where we're affirmatively investing, so not the multi-projects. But this is not intended to allow otherwise private development just to have a lower standard of public review. So at some point, I'll be interested to know what is the right mix, the ratio of subsidized affordable units to the total package, because that seems to be the issue the two letters raise. And I think we'll look for your guidance as to what's the right mix.
We'd be happy to discuss that after the testimony.
Okay, other questions before we take testimony? You want to save your amendment until after testimony?
Yeah, I'll wait
Okay,
there.
so thank you very much. We'll call you back in a bit. Let's hear from who we have signed up to speak, please.
About 7 people signed up. First 3, please, coming up are Charles Johnson, Mike O'Callahan, and Tad Savinar. Mr. Callahan might be gone. Let's go ahead and go. Oh, here he is. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name for the record is Charles Johnson, and I had a really live mic there for a moment.
You can move away from it a little bit.
We've talked a bit about, in previous sessions, about experimentation, and unfortunately, despite the heading of this particular proposal, we don't yet have a mass shelter proposal. I hope we will reemphasize that. I saw perhaps the most realistic number, and unfortunately it's scrolled away, but one of these documents, one of these PDFs that's attached, talks about the thing that we never talk about enough here, and we have to admit we haven't taken enough action on. Tens of thousands of deficit units in affordable housing for people under 60% MFI. I think it was about 25,000 units short. I hope that that number will get more and more discussion, not so much here, but as we move towards an election cycle, because those people really need to know that they need to activate and support proposals like this and even more aggressive proposals so that the housing that we can move forward with housing. In Vienna, they have a better opera than we do. They also have about 30% of their city lives in public subsidized, public constructed housing. So that's just a reality. I don't know what the number is for New York, but it's something that can be done. When the city is economic and thriving, we don't just tweak the design and review process. We commit and we find ways to build the housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. First of all, I want to support what all these people are doing. I think it's great.
Oh, and just put your name in the record.
Mike
please.
O'Callahan is my name. Really complex. You know, it's really interesting hearing the complexity of all the people's concern, and I appreciate that the council does that. As you know, I was involved with Right to Dream, okay, and it took us probably about 3 days to build Right to Dream. Didn't cost us any money, and we housed now 100 people, okay? This is a situation that you're in. You're very familiar with this top-down. That's just what we've been listening to with the last two groups of people who spoke. This is very different than bottom-up. Right to Dream is bottom-up, Dignity Village is bottom-up, and Hazelnut Grove is bottom-up, and they all work. I understand why you don't receive input from the bottom up. Okay, I can understand why you receive input from the top, and that's good. Great. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to house 120 people here? Hey, great. We got 1,200, 1,600 people on the street. Good deal, 10% of them. So we need 10 times this, okay? At least 10 times. But you look at the people that are sleeping without shelter, they say 1,600, scratch a little deeper. You'll see, indeed, they didn't include 600 people in their survey because they were sleeping, because they didn't want to fill out the survey, because they didn't want to give their name. And as I've testified to the council before, we have 5 times that amount of people on the street, okay? You're not looking at the problem, brother. You know, we have 10,000 people on the street. Now, if you guys, if all of us were sitting outside in the rain, we would see an urgency here. And I do appreciate, Charlie, that you've stopped sweeping pretty much, and that people are able to have some security, okay? But you have created a situation that is going to not be beneficial for the community because there's no security. These people are not secure. That's why we need Right to Dreams of 25 or smaller in the community where the community invites us in. The community doesn't want to invite us in because they see the mess that's there now. Okay, they don't like it. I don't blame them. Okay, so you got choice A or B. Same way it is, mess everywhere, or do something about it. Okay, community, get on board, okay? Let's get these people in a safe place, okay, where they can be self-determining. Let's do this. I mean, geez, be an innovator, okay? Let's try. You've got the pattern already. Pretty simple to set up. I'll work with any of you that want to do it. And I have an ad in the Tribune, okay, today, looking for 50 by 50 land where we can start a private club on, okay? And hopefully some private property owner will respond just like the guy did down there so we could start Right to Dream, okay? Don't fight us, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tad Savinar. I'm the Vice Chair of the Design Commission. Yesterday, our Chair, David Wark, and myself and a member of the Landmarks Commission met with Commissioner Salzman. David Wark had the flu, not as a result of that meeting, but he couldn't be here, so I'm reading a letter that he composed. It's been submitted to you. Interestingly enough, I think it touches on some of the issues that you've brought up. But I'll roll through it so that you have the benefit of hearing it, and then certainly can discuss some specifics as to some of the issues that you've already raised. Mayor Hills and Portland City Council, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the ordinance to allow city-subsidized affordable housing to be reviewed through a Type 2X design historic review instead of a Type 3 design historic review. The Design Commission fully supports the creation of and expediting of abundant affordable housing in our city. We recently reviewed 2 housing projects where we offered additional guidance, additional times to meet, and additional support for these projects to the development team. We are committed to assisting the expedient construction of affordable housing projects. However, this proposed ordinance was only shared with us last Thursday, and we would have preferred more time to have a thorough conversation about how to reach our collective goals. We believe additional work is needed to help the needs of affordable housing, such as fee breaks and a swifter and more predictable Type 3 process. Ideally, the land use process remains equal across the board for all types of projects. Affordable housing projects deserve the same level of respect and scrutiny as their neighbors. Affordable housing will be long-lasting and should be designed and reviewed with that in mind. Understanding the immediate need to move things forward, we have the following suggestions to present. 1, the ordinance stipulates minimum requirements for a project in order to be able to qualify for a Type 2X procedure. The minimum number of units, 5, is not aggressive enough if the city is to overcome the crisis in which we find ourselves. Without a significant minimum threshold, there is potential for abuse. Take, for instance, the Oregon Square project, which is providing 900 housing units, 4 blocks. Under the proposed ordinance, that project would have only needed to provide 5 affordable housing units in order to avoid a Type 3 review. We request that the council revisit the minimum requirements and provide a more meaningful threshold. For instance, at least 25% of the proposed housing units of a primarily housing project must be city-subsidized affordable housing units. 2, if this ordinance passes, and this came up in your discussion, staff will be making final land use decisions on significant projects that will have aggressive construction schedules. We respectfully request council members and upper management to empower staff and to allow staff to make expert decisions based in the relevant approval criteria. 3, the ordinance requires at least 1 design advice review for all projects taking advantage of this incentive. The Design Commission requests council to direct staff to establish minimum submittal requirements for these DARs. This will ensure an effective and in-depth early review by the Design Commission with predictable results. 4, if the ordinance were to be extended into October 2016, we would hope that the extension is based on factual evidence from the results of this pilot program. Thank you again for your creativity and leadership in finding ways in which to address Portland's affordable housing crisis. Please know that we are a resource to you and always willing to participate in work groups that provide guidance for legislation such as this ordinance. This is my favorite. The Design Commission is committed to supporting high-quality, low-maintenance, affordable housing where the residents are proud of their home and the neighbors are proud to have the project in their neighborhood. There's also a letter submitted from Landmarks Commission. I don't know if they're here or not, but
We have it. I don't know if there's anybody here from the commission, but we have the letter, yes.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for your service on the commission. I don't understand the concern about the 5 units, because if it was just 5 units in a 900-unit project, it wouldn't be getting a city subsidy.
we're concerned about something that is a Walmart with 5 units.
But it wouldn't get a city subsidy.
I think, I think there's a lot of confusion about where the 5 units came from. I'm not even sure. Kurt gave one explanation, but I'm going to offer an amendment to change that to 20% of the units, just to make it equal with what we require on a multi-project. And for the 2 projects we're talking about that'll probably take advantage of this 2X process or have the option to it, they're well over 20% affordable units.
And
But
so
I'm-
maybe we'll have staff back to tell us when would they give a city subsidy, because that was, I shared your concern, and then I saw, well, there's a city subsidy, we're not going to give it for just a tiny amount of affordability. Thank you.
I think that's correct.
That's a good solution. Yeah, and you recommended 25%,
Right.
same idea.
Right.
Okay. Ed, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next three are Peggy Moretti, John Drentlaw, and John Zarnicki.
Yeah. Come on up, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. I'd like to go first.
Should I go first?
Go ahead, please.
All right. Good morning. My name is Peggy Moretti. I'm the Executive Director of Restore Oregon, a nonprofit that works statewide to preserve and pass forward the historic places that create livable, sustainable communities. Restore Oregon is much attuned to and supportive of the need to retain existing affordable housing that is often the target of demolition. And we certainly support the development of additional affordable housing. There are many examples of historic buildings being successfully redeveloped into affordable housing in Portland, including most recently the Erickson Fritz Apartments in Old Town, and we would love to see more of that. And in fact, one of the developers sits on our board of directors. However, we are concerned that the proposed downgrading of design review for historic properties will have significant negative consequences while having a very negligible effect on bringing new housing to market faster. I sincerely hope City Council will consider these two important points. One, what is approved during our housing emergency will outlive all of us. It will stand in our community for decades. The purpose of a Type 3 review is to ensure that what is developed respects and protects our historic buildings, is compatible with the neighborhood, and upholds standards of quality in its design and construction. Your proposal says it does not exempt compliance with historic standards or district guidelines, but an overtaxed BDS staff that is not trained in historic review, coupled with huge bureaucratic pressure to move projects forward fast, makes the likelihood of a quality Type 2 design review that pushes back when necessary seems slim. It also seems likely that the October expiration date of this emergency could be extended indefinitely. So the idea that this is a short-term one or two project proposal doesn't hold a lot of water in our mind. But more importantly, this proposal to short-circuit a thoughtful and transparent public review will only trim a whopping 9 or 10 days from the process. By the city's own analysis, a Type 3 review takes 51 to 90 days, and a Type 2 takes 42 to 80 days. This will do nothing to expedite the process in a meaningful way, but could leave the city with some very incompatible new development or mangled historic buildings that will stand for 50 years or more. What does make sense in our analysis of this, and in the short time frame with which we've had to look at this and respond to it, is the reduction of the fees for the different levels of review. Restore Oregon urges council to reduce the fee structure without jeopardizing the caliber of design review.
Thank you. Thanks, Peggy, very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Name is John Drentlaw, and what brings me here is because of the process that is being considered. And the reason the process is of concern to me is because I'm also a vice chair commissioner for Clackamas County Planning Commission, and the city of Portland does overlay within all tri-county area here. I think it's very important that we consider the state of Oregon planning and sustainability goals. And if we're moving from a Type 3 to a Type 2, what we are essentially doing is ignoring the number one goal of the state of Oregon, which in the first paragraph states to develop a citizen involvement program that ensures the opportunity for citizens to be involved in all phases of the planning process. And so this is ignoring that first principle. Then that is a matter of the public getting involved. Then we also talk about time and money. If we're concerned about the money and the city is investing money, it would seem like it would be a pragmatic approach to waive the additional fee that is required for these affordable housing. And when looking at affordable housing, and there was a comment brought up regarding 22 gauge exterior versus 18 gauge, affordable housing has a established history of significant deferred maintenance. And that is one of the reasons that you put a more durable surface on there so that you do not have that apparent degrading of the exterior. And that would seem like the city's investment would be very concerned about the longevity of that. And also, if you're removing the public in a process that has been established, the probability of having an appeal come up is much higher. And so in effect, you're going to be extending the time period of this review, and it would go to LUBA. I have many reviews that I have done that have gone to LUBA as well. We haven't had any of them overturned, though. However, this group also needs to consider the land use planning, which is goal number 2. And it goes on to ensure an adequate factual base for decisions and actions. And we're talking about time and money here. And so time is going to be longer. Money is something that can be reduced just by a simple statement that it's no longer going to be required for affordable housing. And then also within the history element, the recreation needs of goal number 8 would have to be ignored. And Commissioner Fritz, with the Parks and Recreation interest, would like to inform you of the recreation areas. It says to provide for human development and enrichment and include, but not be limited to, open space, scenic landscapes, recreational lands, history, archaeology, and natural science resources.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
But just to clarify, we're not proposing to change the approval criteria, and there is public input in a type 2 procedure in the city of Portland, and it's appeal to the Design Commission. So there's multiple opportunities for citizens to have input.
Thank you. John, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm John Zarnicki. I'm an architect and principal at New Traditional Architecture. During that time, if I may, I have always also been architectural consultant to Oregon Housing and Community Services, specializing in affordable housing throughout the state. In addition, I've been, and that was over a course of 10 years. In addition, I've also been architectural consultant to the states for the Oregon Main Street program. That includes Main Street development in relationship to livability overall. The reason I'm here is really quite simple. We're in the danger of downgrading the quality of our neighborhoods. It's not a matter of truly of the fees being too high or the time being too long. What we're really doing is we're backing off of the standards that we have established. Now, the importance of public input, although Commissioner Fritz obviously is correct in terms of the opportunity for public input in the type 2X process is much, much, much less than the opportunity is in the type 3. The relative costs, in addition to the time of the design review, are minuscule. If affordable housing units cost about $500,000 a piece or $300,000 a piece, then that's what they were when I was working at the state commissioner. Let's say 230. Okay, let's say 235.
Those numbers get thrown around, sir. They're substantially less, but we can argue that.
Well, maybe it still comes down to, an additional $10,000 in the review process or $20,000 in the review process, which is less than 1% of the total project costs. And in relationship to the time that's taken, it's really minimal. So I guess there are two things that come to mind. One is that since the cost of review is not in addition to the cost of development, it's integral with development. I think it's important to think about this as just being a part of the budget as opposed to an addition. It's a philosophical conceptual understanding. So we're removing the standards And the way to do this is just to take the funds that would otherwise be used to supplement the affordable housing and make sure that part of those funds are used to cover the development costs, which include review. Let's see.
Sum up, John, because you.
Yes, thank you. Given that, that design review requires, let's see. Just give me a moment here. Thank you. We've been talking about sustainable neighborhoods for the last couple of years now, if not longer. The notion of maintaining the quality of housing, whether it be affordable housing or whether it be market rate. And really the difference is with methods of funding. Whether we're talking about either of those, then we're really talking about the notion of, the all-important notion of NIMBYism, not in my backyard, the reluctance of citizens to have substandard housing in their neighborhood, and the clarity with which folks who live in substandard housing, by substandard, I mean very clearly not designed as well or not designed as compatibly with the neighborhood to increase and maintain livability. It will be so obvious to everyone that the residents, they have not the means to live someplace better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Okay, next.
The last two I show for both lists were Wendy Rom and Paul Grove.
Good morning.
Hi. I'm Wendy Rom, and I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects Historic Resource Committee and on the board of the Bosco Milligan Foundation. But my comments here are my own. This process has been speeded up. I'm a very strong advocate of both the retention and creation of affordable housing. I'm a West End resident and am doing what I can to preserve the exceptionally dense number of affordable housing buildings in that neighborhood against potential demolition threats posed by the excessive height allowances proposed by the Central City 2035 plan. I'm advocating for no net loss there. Regarding the proposed change to the code, I oppose the shift from type 3 to a type 2, especially in historic districts. By saying that, I am not implying that our city staff are not well-intentioned and very, very capable. They are. But this proposal to change from type 3 to type 2 essentially omits the public process. Yes, appeals are possible. But the public process is a foundation of good government, and the effective loss of this part of the process creates a reduction in transparency and a danger of decisions done in the proverbial smoke-filled back rooms. With this change will also be the loss of an opportunity to publicly tell the stories attached to these buildings as they are readapted for an admittedly terribly important use as affordable housing. We are a forgetful species and need reminding. How else but through the public process do we learn about the nearly lost story of the first maternal hospital in Portland? Who knew? Why are we targeting historic buildings once again? They deserve an open public review process at the Historic Landmarks Commission provided by the Type 3 process. For these reasons, I support the reduction in fees, a reduction of the public notice time by 10 days, but a retention of the type 3 process. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning.
Thank you. Paul Grove with the Portland Home Builders Association speaking on behalf of the Home Builders Foundation. For the record, and I wanted to get this out there initially, I wanted to thank council staff, bureau staff for the responsiveness to a project in North Portland and folks' attention to that issue. And it's much appreciated by our executive director and others. Specifically today, talking in support of Resolution 227. It's something that the work of the foundation and that they do, particularly around transitional shelters. Very much supportive of the proposal and the leadership on this front, and want to be a partner in that moving forward. Certainly think it's impactful, in particular for a lot of our partners, nonprofit partners that are resource or capacity constrained. And so as we move forward, we'd like to offer 2 additional suggestions, for council and the work that's going to transpire. The first would be, and this is not news to folks, a potential waiver of fees or associated costs, especially for those that are, again, resource or capacity constrained. This impacts their business model. The funding becomes tenuous. There are a lot of different moving pieces, and these costs, while they might not appear to be much to some, are very impactful to the viability of a project. And the second item we would offer up for consideration is really around the notion of a one-stop shop, if you will, a concierge service for these folks that might not, again, have the staff capacity or resources that are familiar with the bureaus, with the staff, with the processes engaged in undertaking an endeavor of this type. There's been a lot of talk about inter-bureau coordination and different things. And if it's a point person either within the bureaus or a point person that can lead on these types of things, we think it would be much more beneficial to help these folks getting their projects through the door and helping the folks that need it the most. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
So
Okay, thank you.
I would like to.
Want to ask staff to come back
Oh,
up and
okay.
propose your
Sure.
amendment, but yeah, go ahead, please.
I have a couple of questions before you do your amendment,
Before? Okay.
if you wouldn't mind.
Please.
Okay.
So first for housing, what's the standard for getting a city subsidy? How much of a project has to be, or how many units have to be included?
Well, we have a variety of programs, and we do subsidize single-family homes with STC waivers, which would be an indirect subsidy, as well as property tax exemptions. So this ordinance was crafted, and I actually kept all my previous drafts. The 5-unit threshold was selected because it was the cutoff between a single family and a multifamily. We have 19 projects in our current pipeline and about another 12 coming through the fall NOFA process. And frankly, all of our projects exceed 40 units in size. We're not really funding projects of a small scale. The Miracles on Central is under construction. It's right on that edge. Of course, it's a 4-story building in the convention center urban renewal area right near the Rose Garden. But most of our projects are around 100 units in size.
And so Commissioner Saltzman's percentage wouldn't, or
Actually, I
changing the
like
threshold?
that idea because looking forward, if this policy is then applied in the future as we go through the process with planning and sustainability, because the 20-unit threshold is the same threshold that's used in the newly authorized state inclusionary housing bill. So we can provide both direct and indirect assistance to affordable housing developers, principally private developers, and this could receive favorable design treatment in the future if they had at least 20 units within them. So that applies.
Thank you. Then I just have 2 technical questions for BDS, and we're ready to go. In quickly looking on my smartphone, it looks like we currently have design review in a type 2 in Hollywood, Interstate, St. John's, Albina, Outer Southeast, except for Gateway, and in the Central City and Gateway for projects under 2.1 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're already doing, in most of the city, we're already doing type 2s.
Yes.
What's the difference between type 2 and type 2X?
Type 2 is even faster, and given the complexity and the size of the projects we're expecting in the Central City and Gateway, the Type 2X gives the reviewer and the public additional time to comment and work out issues.
Thank you.
So I think I just want to raise, the larger question of we want to see design review in more places. We want to see a more rigorous approach to historic preservation, and we want projects to get through the process quickly. I suspect it's not going to be possible to achieve all 3 of those goals for every project.
difficult, but
So,
we'll try.
you are in effect giving a special treatment to these projects. I mean, I'm going to be explicit about that. But short of some miraculous process change that results in higher quality design review faster with the same staff, in a city where we're going to have a huge pace of development for as far as my eye can see, this seems to me the right approach. I particularly appreciate your commitments to making sure that the standards are still followed, which obviously they are. One thing that was raised in passing, I guess it ought to just be touched on, Commissioner Fish raised it, and that is any thoughts about quality control in the enforcement process where a design is approved and where we don't necessarily get what the commission or the staff thought we were going to get, or a change is made by the applicant in the construction process. Some thoughts about how we deal with that issue. I think, again, regardless of what the rules and procedures are, if what's coming out the pipeline at the other end turns out to be subpar versus what people thought they were approving, then our process isn't working then either. So
We had an error on staff part, and we are working with the applicant on that to retroactively go in and make that project, if I know which project you're talking about, match what was approved through the design review. And they've been dragged through the mud publicly and are willing to work with us on getting that project back to what was expected and approved through the Design Commission approval.
So in general,
I think what left unsaid is we do have a chain of quality control to make sure that what gets approved by design actually gets constructed. It didn't happen in this situation, but
We
do
have
that. We
enormous.
do have that closed circle loop.
Yes, we have enormous volume of work coming through and complexity, and we are short-staffed, but we are hiring and filling positions, and mistakes will be made, but we're working our best to correct those after the fact when they are made.
Can I just make a comment? You said drag through the mud. I have a slightly different view, having watched the debate unfold, which is I think it reinforces the sense that we all have that Portland really cares about the look and feel of their city. And when they make a decision about a building that's on the edge, close to the water, that's blocking views, and it's an iconic site, and the developer says, I'm going to build it to a specification that you can be proud of, Portland expects us to, enforce that bargain. And whatever disappointment I have about that process is not directed to staff. I mean, we all make mistakes, things happen, but I think there is a positive thing that comes out of this, that people really do care about how buildings in key locations look. And I had two questions, though, because we had testimony about alternate approaches. I just thought I'd ask Paul. One was a waiver of fees, and one was concierge service. In addition to what Commissioner Saltzman's proposing, and I'm going to support his proposal, we do have concierge service for the film industry through PDC. Should we at some point be thinking about funding a concierge service through BDS?
We currently have a concierge service for large projects such as projects in South Waterfront. It's I can't remember the sort of dollar trigger.
No, I meant for these kinds of
projects.
projects.
But for these types of projects,
less capacity, more concerned about time.
we have something that we've put in place currently, which is similar to concierge. So we've identified a single point of contact who will assist in the respective codes, whether it's the land use code or the building codes, and partnering with the design team and staff at Portland Housing Bureau. So we have something in works. It's not formalized like a concierge service is in the process manager per se, but it's mimicking that process, that approach.
Well, I applaud that, because one of the things that this council worked on a few years ago was co-location. And
Yes.
that whole idea was through simplifying the points of contact, making the process work better. So good job.
And I do want to connect with Commissioner Novick. That's part of what he was asking is you have these concerns, you have staff that are requested and asked to focus on these priorities, but then there's other jobs. And so how we sort of resolve all of it is certainly an ongoing conversation, but we are all committed. It's just a matter of capacity and how do you spend your time and where and how.
Okay, so I wanted to move an amendment to change the requirement for eligibility for the type 2X from a minimum threshold of 5 units, affordable units, to a minimum of 20% affordable units.
Second.
And then I also wanted to just get on the record that we will have a report back to council in October or in the end of October about how this experiment went. And we will also, the Housing Bureau will require that all applicants who wish to participate in this type 2X process have a signed agreement with the Housing Bureau that outlines their responsibilities under the regulatory agreements to provide actual affordable housing. So those things, just want to get on the record. I think those were points.
Second.
Yeah, okay.
Can I offer just a final friendly amendment that I've reviewed with your eminent chief of staff? On the draft in front of you in the ordinance, Dan, on page 3, we've had some concern about this automatically rolling over. And it seems to me that because the council has to act in any event to extend the emergency if it chooses to, my friendly amendment would be to delete the last sentence of section 3.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So just delete that if they extend, the council will. I mean, if the council chooses to extend, we're likely going to take up that. But for those concerned about automatic rollover, it seems to me we could just delete that without doing any violence to the ordinance.
Okay, I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment accepted. I'm looking for where the 5 unit to 20% provision would fit in the ordinance. I think I missed.
The bottom of page 2.
Oh, there it is, 5 or more units. So it means a privately owned property in which 20% or more of the units receive a city subsidy, right? Okay, that's where that verbiage would change.
Could we actually, because this is going to be a standard that BDS is going to have to apply, I'd like to make sure we actually wordsmith this now before you adopt it. So if you want to, will it read, the term city subsidy project means a privately owned property with 20% or more units receiving a city subsidy after the effective date? Is that what we want it to read?
Yeah, sounds fine.
Just
So those are the words that put Commissioner Salzman's amendment into the text. Okay, further discussion of the amendments, including the friendly amendment deleting the last sentence. Roll call vote, please, on the amendments.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. And then on the emergency ordinance as amended.
Fritz.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Saltzman and Mayor Hales, for bringing this forward. Thank you to staff in both bureaus for your, as always, excellent work. It's, as a former community land use chair at a neighborhood association, it was always kind of a toss-up to me whether I preferred the 2X or the type 2 process or the type 3. Type 2 allows citizen input into staff decision with an appeal to a not council body. Type 3 allows citizen input to the staff report, which then goes to a citizen body, which then gets appealed to council. And depending on the topic and the membership of the council, sometimes I preferred one rather than the other. So the fact that the code already says that design review is always type 2 in all of the areas except for Central City and Gateway inexpensive project tells me that the type 2 process is a good one. And if it's good enough for Albina and outer southeast, it should be good enough in Central City as well, especially on these particular projects. And so I don't see it as a diminishment of community oversight. In fact, it makes the Design Review Commission the final decision maker, and that gives them more power rather than less. So I believe that this is a good strategy, especially since it's a pilot project. So thank you all for your work. Aye.
Fish.
Thank you, Dan, for bringing this forward, and thank you for your tenacity. I think the director mentioned in passing that there's something like 31 projects in the pipeline or soon to be in the pipeline. So that's an extraordinary boost of production at a time we desperately need new units, and we're facing a shortage of units. We have a supply problem. And I think this is an innovative idea that Commissioner Salzman wants us to test over a limited period of time. And if it turns out to be a good idea, we can extend it or modify it. If it turns out to have unanticipated problems, we can limit it or end it. But I appreciate that you're pitching a good idea. And I also appreciate the work of these three people that have testified before us, these professionals. They do a great job under very difficult circumstances. And I also appreciate that in the conversation we had today, you affirmed the commitment to the kinds of design standards that we all care about. And I just want to reiterate, a well-designed, functional building is not only something that any of us would want to live in, and therefore is affirming of the human spirit, it is also a building that tends to last longer, which makes it a good investment of taxpayer dollars. And more often than not, it builds community support for what we're doing. And I've never understood why we didn't make the same kind of investment in our public habitation structures that we do in all other public structures that we're proud of. So I appreciate the effort you're trying to do to stretch the dollar and to cut red tape. And thank you, Dan, for your leadership on this. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank our Housing Bureau Director and our Development Services Director and our BDS Chief Planning Director.
Close enough.
Close enough. For all their hard work on these ideas. And I want to also thank the design commissioners and the landmarks commissioners for all the hard work they do on behalf of our city and ensuring that we do have quality design and great living spaces. And I think what we're trying to do here is simply, undertake a pilot project to see if we can move things a little more quickly, a little less expensively, but still, we're not relaxing one design standard whatsoever. So we got to try some things different under a housing emergency. This is one of those tries. Let's give it a shot. Aye.
Novick?
I really appreciate Commissioner Saltzman's efforts to address the housing emergency, and this is a great step. I just want to reiterate my concern that we treat our permitting staff and all the bureaus nicely and don't make it clear to them that they can't magically generate more time, and make it clear to them that if we're prioritizing X, then we realize you're going to have less time for Y, and that we send that same message to the development community. So I appreciate everybody's remarks on those scores. Aye.
Hales?
Well, I want to thank you, Dan, for bringing this forward and crafting it well. I also want to thank our city budget office because they've been going through this new tool that they've developed called GATOR, which stands for Government Accountability, Transparency, and Results, where they look at a city system or process and reconsider and re-engineer with the engagement of commissioners in charge and bureau directors and others that have skin in that game. And it's a good tool, and it was one of the things that led to this recommendation. So I want to thank Andrew Scott and his team for making that tool work for us as managers of the enterprise. I also want to echo the point here about experimentation. I mean, one thing that government doesn't do very often is pilot projects or experiment. We tend to take a long time in developing new policy and then put it into place rather than say, we're going to try this for a while. And that's essentially what we're doing here. We've got another 6 months of this declared emergency. We'll see whether it makes sense to extend it at that point or not. It will be a public discussion and a legislative action by the council to do that if we do that. And then projects or policies that we've been trying out during that time can be reviewed as well. And we just need to keep trying things because we are in a crisis. And whether it's the housing delivery system or our shelter system or even camping, we have to think anew and try things and then see what works and doesn't and be willing to admit what hasn't worked and move on. So I think that spirit this is very consistent with that spirit. And again, I really appreciate Tad, you and the other volunteers who put a huge amount of time into trying to maintain the quality of design in this city. It's a huge task that we give you as volunteers, and hopefully that we will not wear you out, but we will also ensure that both the historic resources of this city and the quality of new construction are held to the highest possible standard. And I appreciate, Rebecca, your commitment to that and your colleagues as well. Let's give it a try. Aye. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the second of the two ordinances, which is 227. Ready to vote on that? Okay, let's take a vote on that, please.
Fritz?
Well, I'm very grateful that we're doing the more comprehensive review and discussion that will involve all of the commissions and the community at large. That obviously needs to happen. I appreciate, again, the stopgap measure and was able to support it because of this second resolution. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
I just also wanted to add my thanks to the City Budget Office for their help on thinking through these issues. Aye.
Novick.
I'm glad the city budget office is getting some love, because once the public starts noticing the recommendations and certain items of this year's budget, they're going to get all sorts of complaining calls. Aye.
Hales.
I think we get those calls. Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the remaining items in our morning regular agenda. Item 228.
Pay settlement of lawsuit by Trelane Hunter in the sum of $26,516 involving the Portland Police Bureau.
Mr. Landrum is here and has an amendment to propose, I believe.
That's correct. Morning, Commissioners, Mayor. I'm David Landrum from the City Attorney's Office, and I have reached an agreement with Plaintiffs' Counsel to settle this case for a total of $26,515.69. And the amendment, or the change that I'm asking for, is we want the ordinance to authorize 2 checks rather than just one. One check in the amount of $22,503.71. That goes to the plaintiff and his counsel. The other is a check for $4,011.98 so that we can pay medical lien directly rather than through the plaintiff's counsel.
Okay. I have moved the amendment.
Second.
Further discussion on the amendment. Let's take a vote on the amendment and see if anyone wants to testify on the ordinance itself.
Fritz.
So just so you know, for future reference, we had a discussion a week or so ago about just changing the language to make payment, since sometimes we don't do checks anymore, we do electronic transfers or whatever. So for the future, let's all be vigilant when we have stuff like this coming to council to change that language. That way we wouldn't have to make the 2-check change. But thank you for spotting that this time. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. Thank you, David. Anyone want to speak on this item?
I had, let's see, sorry, Charles Johnson and Mike O'Callahan had signed up.
Okay,
They left.
who have left, then is this, where'd it go? This is an emergency ordinance, so unless you have any further guidance for us, we'll take a vote on that, please.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Thank you, David. Aye. Okay, 229.
Amend the fiscal year 2015-16 revised budget to respond to the housing emergency.
If there's no objection, I'm going to reschedule that to March 16th. And 230.
230, accept bid of James W. Fowler Company LLC for Powell Sewer Rehabilitation Phase 1 for $9,145,000.
This is a bid acceptance. Is there a motion to adopt the report?
Well, do we have someone here to?
I don't think we have a presentation on this one.
Was,
Do we not? Didn't we have this?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
I thought we had this before, and this is just the acceptance of the bid.
I'll move acceptance of the
It came
procurement
in
report.
below the estimate, okay.
Yeah.
We have a second.
Yeah, Christine's not here, so unless there are questions, I think we could either take it or not, but it is, right, below the engineer's estimate, 18% MWESB participation. Looks copacetic to me. Someone
Yeah, I
move,
moved
Dan moved the
acceptance.
adoption of the report, is there a second?
Here, a second.
Is there a second to adopt the report?
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Anyone want to speak on this item? Roll call then, please.
Fritz.
So I obviously respect the procurement process. I am concerned that about the relatively low level of minority and women small businesses, particularly when you break out the minority businesses as opposed to the disadvantaged businesses. It's only $4,283 out of $9 million. I asked about the employees of James W. Fowler, and I'm told that they currently have 107 employees, of which 12 are female and 15 are minorities.
We'll suspend the rules and let
Sorry, I was busy.
Mrs. Booty respond to your questions, please.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, thought I had enough time to run across the street.
Sorry, we
Christine
got
Moody,
ahead of you.
Procurement Services. So you have before you the procurement report recommending a contract award to James W. Fowler. The engineer's estimate on this project was $10,800,000. On January 5th, 2016, 6 bids were received, and J.W. Fowler is the low bidder at $9,145,000, which is 16.44% below the estimate. The Bureau of Environmental Services has reviewed the bid items and accepts the proposed pricing as good. Working with Procurement Services, BES identified the Powell Sewer Rehabilitation Phase 1 project to pilot the new subcontractor equity program. This program establishes an aspirational goal of 20% of hard construction costs for disadvantaged minority, women, and emerging small businesses. DMW ESB subcontracting at the time of bid was 13.78%. And working with J.W. Fowler, we were able to find additional opportunities, and the DMW ESB participation at this time is at 18%, with the entire 18% going towards disadvantaged minority and women contractors. J.W. Fowler has also committed to look for additional opportunities once the project has started, estimated at $200,000. I will turn this back over to council if you have any questions.
So I was in the middle of my discussion, and obviously the procurement process is as it is, and I know that you continue to work on how can we encourage or require or give points for both additional minority contracting and subcontracting, and also companies that are making an effort to diversify their workforce. So that was, it's really of concern to me, and I know it is to you too. So I know that we're going to be getting a report on the community benefits agreement coming to council in the next few months, the pilot projects that we did. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for us to look at what are our rules and how can we make it even more likely that we're going to be getting subcontractors in the pipeline, so that companies know what's coming up in the next 6 months, 12 months, even before we put it out to bid, so that Oregon tradeswomen can start training people for the particular subcontracting jobs. I mean, that's obviously not procurement services job, but it's something that's the entire council's job, and that we should be looking at how can we promote, use public dollars to make sure that people, everyone has opportunity to benefit from working using those dollars. So thank you for your ongoing work on that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Commissioner. I think that the bureaus have really heard council and are trying to do some more promoting of projects. For instance, BES is having an outreach event this afternoon to talk about contracting opportunities for the next 6 to 9 months. And that's a merging of general contractors and minority contractors so that they can start doing that preparation that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and then including the trades apprenticeships program to let them know we're going to need more of this kind of skill than this. And so if folks are just coming to their door who are able-bodied and willing to learn but aren't necessarily wedded to being a particular trade or another, that they can help direct them to the ones that are going to be coming up most likely, and get them trained in the time allowed. So thank you, colleagues, for all your work on this.
Fish?
It was actually, it almost felt like a movie. You were raising all these concerns, and you came in stage left, sat down, and answered them.
Get focused on my notes.
That's the way it should work. I'm delighted that it came in below the engineer's estimate, so that's a savings to our ratepayers. And we've already had a discussion about the benefit of this project. And thanks to Scott Gibson and the team, and thanks to procurement for your good work. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Niels?
Thank you. Aye. Okay, let's move on to 231.
Authorize a contract with Winaha Group, Inc. in the amount of $250,000 for on-call construction project management services at city-owned Spectator venues as solicited through RFP number 118847.
Ms. Hartnett, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Excuse me, Susan Hartnett, Spectator Facilities and Development Manager in the Office of Management and Finance. I will be brief, hopefully less than the 10 minutes I have on the agenda. The item before council authorizes an on-call contract for construction project management services to support the Spectator Venues program. You may recall that we've had 2 prior contracts for these types of services. The first one was in 2012 when we began with the replacement of the ice floor and ice plant at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum. The second one was in 2014 and was part of the contract process for the Veterans Memorial Coliseum options study. We have continued with a fairly robust annual program of repair and replacement projects, primarily at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum to assure public safety and the reliability of operations at the VMC. The work under this contract before you today will continue to support those ongoing efforts. This contract may be used to support some work at other Spectator program facilities. For example, we are going to be moving into the next steps in ADA transition plan implementation at Providence Park and may utilize some of the subcontractors under this contract to help to support that work. We may also be utilizing some of it in our ongoing work with Metro and the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts as we work to assess and quantify the repair, replacement, and capital improvement needs at those facilities. As the clerk mentioned, this contract was solicited through an RFP 118847, and Wanaha Group LLC was selected by an evaluation committee that actually included representatives from our partner organizations at the Rose Quarter and Providence Park. Wanaha Group also supports the city's goals for diversity in contracting. They are a minority business enterprise and an emerging small business. And coincidentally, their offices are in the Left Bank building directly across the street, which make it very easy for them to get to the Coliseum. The contract is for $250,000 and the term runs through June 30th, 2018. I will acknowledge that in the second directive of the ordinance, it does mention the word checks. I will make sure that we change that language in future ordinances. Commissioner Fritz, thank you for pointing that out, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Susan. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone want to speak on this item? If not, it's an emergency ordinance. Let's vote, please.
Fritz,
100% minority participation here. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Thank you. Aye. Okay, 232.
Update city travel policy.
We have an amendment, right? Yes, we do. Welcome back.
Hello, Betsy Ames, Office of Management and Finance.
Michelle Kirby, City Controller, BRFS.
Okay. So we do have an amendment, is that right?
We're here today to seek your approval to the revision to the travel policy, which is Accounting Admin Rule FIN 613. So we brought it forth last week, and then at your direction, we strengthened the section related to approval of travel. So now the policy states that all travel-related expenses must be authorized in advance of travel and must be approved by the Bureau Director and the Bureau's Commissioner in charge. Commissioners in charge can authorize one or more designees to approve the travel on their behalf, and the Bureau Directors can authorize one or more designees to approve the travel on their behalf. And this authorization needs to be in writing and submitted to my office so that we have it on file. And so we've revised what we think your intent was, and so we are seeking your approval at this time.
You want us to move that amendment?
Please, go ahead.
There's that amendment, and then we also are requesting that you include an implementation date of April 1st, 2016, so we can communicate these changes to the bureaus and get all the forms ready for their use.
Okay, so Commissioner Fish moves both those amendments. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Did this capture what you wanted to see?
Yes,
Commissioner
I
Saltzman?
appreciate it very much.
Okay, good. Any further discussion? Roll call, please,
On the amendment,
on the amendments.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye, and I don't believe testimony is appropriate because we asked for that last week. Unless anyone wants to speak on this item, we'll take a vote on the amended ordinance.
Fritz.
Thank you. This makes some very sensible changes. Aye.
Fish.
Thank you both for your good work and for your work fine-tuning it over the last week. Aye.
Saltzman.
I appreciate the fine tuning and thank you very much for your work. Aye.
Novick.
Thank you for your work, and I would have voted yes last week. Aye.
Hales.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, 233, please.
Accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $400,000 from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and a grant in the amount of $120,438 from Oregon State Marine Board for the Willamette Park Boat Ramp Tow Repair, Debris Boom Repair, and Dredge Project.
Commissioner Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor. I put this on the regular agenda to celebrate that we are receiving a grant in the amount of $400,000, and another one for $120,000, thanks to our great staff who write these grants and our community support. The Willamette Park Boat Ramp is the most heavily used access point on the Willamette River and the only access point to the river on the west side of Portland. The ramp area and transient dock, and that's not used in the derogatory sense that we sometimes hear of transients, are currently limited by substantial settlement buildup, making operations in low water extremely difficult and hazardous, and causing delays to boat users and emergency vehicles. We applied to the Oregon State Marine Board and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, so I'm very pleased to bring these acceptance of these two grants. The total award of $520,438 will allow Portland Parks and Recreation to make crucial repairs that will restore this heavily used community access point to full functionality. If anyone does have any questions, Maya Agarwal, Portland Parks and Recreation Senior Planner, and Jorge Vicencio, Senior Associate Engineer, are here to answer any questions.
Great. Questions about this project? So this is...
Or did you want to add anything? Did I mess up?
No, I think that's right.
Okay.
So this is repair of the existing
Correct.
dock, not a new one.
We get many requests to do additional dock work,
Yeah.
and we don't have the funding for it nor the planning in some cases. So at the least, we're repairing the one that we have through generous grants from the state.
Great. Okay. Thank you both very much. Anyone want to speak on this item? Doesn't look like it. Then let's take a vote, please, to accept the money.
Fritz.
Yes, looking further in my notes, the last upgrade was in 1997, so it's really past due, and I'm very glad to be able to do it. Thank you both to the staff who are here today, and also Shelley Hunter and Michelle Rodriguez for seeking out the grants. This is a good team effort, and thank you for your work. Aye.
Fish.
Congratulations, Commissioner Fritz and the Parks Bureau. This is a heavily used facility, and it soon will be complemented by a new pump station that has been designed and developed with the community. So terrific work. Aye.
Saltzman.
Good work. Aye.
Novick.
Congratulations. Aye.
Thank you.
Hales.
I remember that last upgrade, and I think I was Parks Commissioner then, and I'm very happy as a boat owner to pay my very expensive Oregon State Marine Board fee so it can pay for projects like this. Thank you very much. And it looks like, by the way, between these grants, the ones for PBIM and one for PBIM and one for transportation, there were at least $1 million to the good today. So that's a good day's work. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. How much is the fee to the Marine Board?
My boat's about $200, so it's not to be sneezed at.
All right, then.
234.
Amend the regional water sales agreements with Tualatin Valley Water District and the City of Tualatin regarding the purchase and interruptible water during the summer.
Roll call vote, please.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
I want to thank the Water Bureau team for bringing this home. And just to remind my colleagues, we serve almost 1 million people in the region, and about 400,000 of those people receive water through a wholesale customer. The smallest amount of water that we sell to our wholesale customers is called interruptible water, and it's the discretionary water that goes above and beyond the guaranteed amount of water we provide them. We had a disagreement about how to interpret and apply some key clauses in the contract. I commend the Bureau and our esteemed wholesale customers for working this out through mediation and through negotiation and not through protracted litigation. And the upside for our community, including our ratepayers, is that by resolving this contractual dispute, which admittedly is a small piece of the pie, of the puzzle, it opens the door to us being able to sell more water to our wholesale customers. And nothing makes a Water Bureau director happier than to sell more water. So thanks to everyone for the good work. This is an honorable compromise, and I'm pleased to support it. There we go. Aye.
Saltzman,
Good work. Aye.
Novick,
In a world beset by drought, I'm glad that we have discretionary water to sell. Aye.
There you go.
Hales.
Well, I appreciate the good work here. This is really important to keep the solid relationship with wholesale customers and sell them more water. Because the Bull Run's a great source. People sometimes go to crazy lengths to avoid using Bull Run water, but this gives them the opportunity to do the right thing for their own citizens. Aye. Okay, 235, sorry.
235, authorize application to the Oregon Office of State Fire Marshal for a grant in the amount of $33,000 for advanced hazmat life support and toxic.
So,
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to say a word. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Sean Christensen, Hazmat Training Lieutenant with Portland Fire and Rescue. As was stated, this is we're seeking authorization to apply for this grant through the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office through the Hazardous Materials Emergency Preparedness Grant Program. So this training is to, as was basically stated, provide recertification and certification for new employees within City of Portland and the region and actually the state, since we are a state team also, for advanced hazmat life support and then the Tox Medic course. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Anyone want to speak on this item? If not, then let's take a vote, please.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman,
Thanks, Lieutenant. Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Hales.
Well, speaking of boats, we had a huge fire about 10 days ago that destroyed about 300 boats on Hayden Island. And boy, if you talked about the need for hazmat training and to deal with toxics, that had to be a pretty serious challenge for the Fire Bureau.
I was there and working on that most of the evening, yes.
Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff that caught fire that isn't good to breathe. So that's why this training really matters, because our folks are at risk in situations like that. Who knows what chemicals that really could threaten our firefighters' health, not to mention everyone else. So important work. Thank you. Aye. Okay, 236.
36, amend the Special Traffic Control District Code to create a uniform temporary street closure approval process.
Commissioner Novick.
So, colleagues, for the past couple of years, Commissioner Fish and I have worked together and asked the public works bureaus we oversee to find better ways of coordinating maintenance and utility work to minimize street and sidewalk closures, to minimize the impact of such closures on vehicle traffic, pedestrians, bikers, and adjacent business owners. What we have here is a proposal to amend a portion of the code to basically delete exemptions to the requirement that anyone performing work in the right-of-way is required to get a permit to close the street. And here to elaborate on that is Faith Weingarten.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing the proposal. I'm Faith Weingarten. I am PBOT Temporary Street Use Permitting Program Manager. Our goal is to assure that when traffic flow or pedestrian flow is interrupted to facilitate construction, utility work, or maintenance, that there's a well-thought-out, approved plan for traffic control and pedestrian routing. This has, of course, always been the goal, but now there is a need to have the process more formalized. Although code states that anyone performing work in the right-of-way is required to get a permit to close the street, there is an exemption in code to this requirement if there is a separate city permit to do the work, for example, a street opening permit for utilities. Historically, if someone performing work in the right-of-way under a separate city permit needed to close a lane or sidewalk, they may have randomly sent a traffic control plan to the traffic engineer for input. Because many city permits give a long range of time to complete the work, it was not clear when and where this work would occur in the right-of-way. As our city has grown and continues to grow, we are requesting the change in code being proposed to better manage the right-of-way, requiring anyone whose work in the public right-of-way to obtain a lane or sidewalk closure permit fits within the current process to have a traffic control plan reviewed, approved, and tracked for specific dates. The fee assessed provides cost recovery for the activities of the program, for example, traffic engineer review time. Currently, there is an interim method in place to achieve these goals, but in order to be consistent with the permitting process in place, we would like to align this with our current permitting process for sidewalk closures and lane closures. The end result would support our goals of improved right-of-way management and coordination. And any questions?
Questions? Looks like there aren't any. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
This is not an emergency ordinance, so unless there's any testimony, it will pass the second reading next week.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And we're recessed till 2 p.m.